Topic of the day, creating online shopping experiences that give you an edge. And today we have Eli and Karen, who are seasoned experts from some of the really best companies on agencies in this field, creating amazing e-commerce experiences, combining, for example, Shopify with other tools like, say, Sanity. So let's just first introduce ourselves. Eli.
Yeah, so I've been a developer for a little over a decade now. 6 of those years I've spent in agency leadership within technology. Most recently, I joined the team at Half Helix, where we build e-commerce sites on Shopify's platform. We're known as the agency that doesn't like to say no to hard problems. So this is a couple of our clients there. But yeah, I've also focused the last 4 or 5 years of my career heavily in the headless CMS space. So Sanity is one of the tools that I like to reach out for, among others. But yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's funny. One of our post-its as we started Sanity was the answer is never no. It's always just a price. It's either hard or it's easy. So what's possible?
Exactly. Yeah. It just depends, right?
Exactly. Karen.
Hey guys, I'm Karen. I'm the design and experience director here at WeMake. WeMake Websites is essentially a Shopify Plus agency for international brands. We're based here out of Europe and North America as well. And yeah, we essentially like to kind of help grow and scale brands who want to go international. So working with sort of clients such as Hasbro, Pangaea, UFC, etc., as you can see here. So yeah, I work very much in the design and experience side of things. So designer at heart, and yeah, really love sort of bringing brands experiences to life. So really excited to kind of chat today about what we've got planned.
Fantastic. It also appears to me from our kind of intro chats that you both span the gamut a bit. You're very technical, Karen, and you also have a clear design background as well, Eli. Isn't that true?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I've got a development background as well. I started as a designer developer, and I think Eli, you started as the designer and moved into development as well.
That's exactly right. So my degree is actually in communication arts, specifically in illustration design. So yeah, it's funny how we've both made our way into Shopify, Karen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it kind of makes sense, right? Like in this field, it's all very connected, and like programming stuff is a kind of design, and designing stuff you need to understand the programming really well to really get the best out of it.
Exactly.
I'm the CTO and the co-founder of Sanity, and it's a platform for structured content. I'm just going to very briefly. It's one part of it. It's what we call the content lake. It's a content database backend distribution system, and it's a real-time kind of collaboration system where you can bring together all your content sources. Either it's authored content by humans, or it's a content source like a product database from Shopify. I think that's a big reason Sanity has gotten big in the e-commerce space and is used with Shopify a lot. The studio experience, that's a framework, an open source framework that people use to build the authoring experience with Sanity. That's also very possible to integrate with all kinds of other systems and to really customize the authoring experience so that it fits the organization well. And all of this is just like a regular React and JavaScript app. So teams can work with the same people who are used to do front-end work and all kinds of work. So it's kind of just a regular non-specialist set of tools that works, of course, with every modern front-end framework. But of course, we didn't create Sanity because of that. This is just the parts that that it comprises it. Our whole thing was, we used to be an agency as well. We were frustrated with the tools we had, and we felt that both we ourselves, our customers, were kind of held back by the content tools. So in one sense, my framing of this and our framing of this is as a platform for creating remarkable integrated experiences, which is, of course, very important now in the e-commerce space. So kind of that's why all of these things exist. So during this conversation, it's possible to ask questions in real time. We'll try and integrate them into our chat as we go. So feel free to just add that to the chat, and Kate will curate and show us those questions at the end. So for anyone who saw, I made a YouTube video some weeks ago called Making Product Pages That Pop. And for anyone who saw that, you'll know I had at one point like 5 different rear wheels for my mountain bike because I could not understand the e-commerce experience. Like there is at least 3 different hub standards that are all called something with spline that are incompatible. And it's a very painful experience and it's very expensive. And of course, for the store, it's painful in terms of the returns and all the customer calls that I'll be making. But also it's kind of just painful. I want to look for a different shop, a clearer shop that makes it easier for me to get the right things early. And that's kind of where I feel a lot of e-commerce is right now in terms of the state of the art. When I just go out and buy something, the stores are very generic. They are often using just like the off-the-shelf standard kind of product page that every other vendor has, and it's just hard. Do you have a take on do you agree, and do you have a take on why this is happening? Let's start with you, Karen.
Yeah, I guess sort of like thinking about where sort of e-commerce is sort of going and everything at the moment. Like you say, there are a lot of stores out there and a lot of brands who do kind of just sort of take the off-the-shelf sort of themes and things and utilize those. But in this day and age, like you really have to stand out. Like one of the main things that people come to us trying to do is to try and become a unique shopping experience. So you really have to ensure that you're delivering on certain sort of features and functionality that makes it easier to shop online. So sort of what you're talking about there with like the different sort of back tire and stuff for like your bike, it's like people would want sort of features that allow you to, let's say, compare the 3 different tires or something that somebody is trying to sell to you. So, you know, we've sort of brought in those features and those experiences that kind of help ease that shopping journey throughout, but also integrates kind of like that storytelling and that branding and what makes you unique as a brand as well. So yeah, that's kind of what we're sort of seeing at the moment as we kind of work with quite a few brands at the moment.
So I'm guessing you see those companies who already understand like why they would invest in an improved experience. That's why they kind of reach out to an agency, I expect. What are they looking for, Eli? What are their asks from their perspective?
Yeah, I think their ask is usually twofold. One is to help them understand how to communicate, their product offering from a visual perspective. So often that comes in a form of a request for proposal to redesign their site or to, see what opportunities might currently exist. And then the other definitely is a technology solution, whether that technology solution is aimed at an internal process, so improving processes internally, or aimed at an external goal, which might be, create components that communicate X, Y, and Z. I think the main thing that, the main problem that we try to solve in either state is always, how do we understand your product? What aspects of the product can we communicate better? And then additionally, how can we improve the user experience either through content or, through additional features or components that might help conversion rates or that might help clarify some of these friction points from a product perspective.
Exactly, because I guess that's where it's at. Like the conversion is, of course, the driver. That's the final ask. Like, can we improve the conversion? It's always the ask. But like, I'm guessing depending on the kind of product, the kind of brand, the customer journey is different. The kind of obstacles to making purchasing decisions are different. How do you think about that, Karen?
Yeah,
so perspective.
I mean, from a design perspective and an experience perspective, like we've got brands who, for instance, Pure Electric, who sell e-scooters, and then we have a brand that, such as like Pangaea or DB, that sell apparel. those have to have very different experiences to kind of sell those products. Like sort of Eli was saying around having, you know, a lot of sort of product descriptions and extensive descriptions for like the e-scooter, you know, you have to sell that in a different way. There's a lot to kind of talk about and sort of, I guess, sort of say about an e-scooter versus a t-shirt, right? And so you really have to try and understand and figure out what is the customer needing to know at what stage when they're buying this e-scooter, right? Mm-hmm. So you really have to think about, you know, a lot of people would love to just shove an entire manual of how the e-scooter works and everything up the top of the homepage and be like, here we go, it's done. But you really have to think about breaking it down into small kind of, you know, it really is storytelling. And it really is kind of breaking it down into that kind of like chunking where you essentially take small pieces of information and make it digestible and make it nice and easy through like sort of engaging layouts and through video and things like that. And then on the other hand, you have the t-shirt, which is apparel. It's like, well, that, you know, that's going to be very heavy focused on the imagery, probably less so than about the fabric or where it was made. So you really have to think about what is super, super key for that customer when they're interacting with that website, what information needs to be served at the right time so they don't get overwhelmed.
Mm. Do you have a vocabulary for that? Like when you think about these things from a design perspective, like what do we call that? Like the mindset that a customer goes through from like discovering that a product kind of category exists and making a decision to actually buy something.
That's a really good question, actually. I guess like what would we call that? I mean, it really is that sort of like customer journey. I mean, that's kind of what we would call that in terms of like how that person would sort of be purchasing it. But are you sort of talking about how we would think about categorizing each of those kind of elements? Is that the kind of question you've got?
No, actually, like fair enough to say like we don't actually have like a language for it, because that's my feeling as well. Like I don't have a language for it. I just wondered if like maybe people more specialized in e-commerce would have that, but that's fair enough. Like that's pretty common, I guess. Like it's a craft, it's not a science, right? So but I think it's interesting to, before we get into the actual kind of tactics and how we actually do these things, Eli, could you also talk to that, like how we think about like different products being different brands being different, and the journey being different, and how to tackle that in terms of our approach?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of Half Helix, the way that we approach that is through pretty in-depth discovery sessions with our clients. What we like to do internally is to put ourselves in the shoes of the clients. What is it that they're trying to convey with the stories that they're trying to tell, with the PDPs that they want us to design and deliver? There's always we've always found that there's at least two perspectives. One, the perspective of the client itself. Here's a story of, I'll use one of the examples, Rothy's.com is one of our clients. From a client perspective, here's everything that they want to convey and to communicate within their product. The material that it's made of, the sustainability factor, the fact that the material is like a soft cotton, but it's also 100% recycled material. So that's very important to them. Their color palette is also something else that's very important to them. They've got a very unique patent on colors that I won't get into at this. But seeing those products in person and in store is an experience that we're trying to translate into a digital space. So how do we do that? There are specific things that we can do with regard to the components and the storytelling elements that we provide to the client that allows them the flexibility and the freedom to put those pieces together to tell those stories and to communicate those details. So you were saying, Simon, about the bike spokes and the rear wheel tire types. I believe 100% there's a component out there that exists that might be able to communicate everything that it is that you were looking for, that might have helped you make your buying decision a lot faster.
Exactly. Like I think that's an interesting thing from my perspective then, was like that's purely understanding that there are 3 different hubs on the market that are all called something with spline. They require different like parts that are compatible with. So like a guide. So I have seen some stores that are able to kind of think more openly about that. When I search, I was buying beds a while back for my kids, and I searched for bed frames. And the store I searched was so well designed that instead of giving me only beds, it also gave me a guide to think about mattresses and how like different kinds of mattresses, which was exactly my kind of fear, picking the wrong kind of mattress. So now my kind of immediately I was like, now I know what I have a kind of certainty. I'm now able to buy a little bit more expensive mattresses with like a certainty that this is what my kids should have. And I think that is weirdly rare, like that experience, because I think exactly what you said. Sometimes it's like very simple technical specs like that. Other times it's more of an experiential thing. Like I was trying to extend, I'm in Norway, it's very cold here. I was trying to extend the season, buying a fire pit for my garden. And that's more of a like trying to understand the size of it, how it will feel. Will it be smoky? Is it good in like in a closed kind of neighborhood with lots of neighbors nearby with like terraces and stuff? Those kinds of things. And that's kind of more of a storytelling. Like maybe one of them is more of a technical feature thing. The other more is storytelling, making me feel the thing. Both of those experiences were equally bad. Of course, I'm also going to like third-party stores. So maybe if the first-party stores would have been better, I don't know. But I think the interesting part to me is then, I think clearly everyone understands. Like you can see these same brands, they have concept stores. They understand the value in investing in a remarkable customer experience. Yeah. So then that brings us to why. What's kind of holding that back? Like, what do you feel our customers see as obstacles, or what are holding them back from kind of going fully in? How are they tempering their investment will, so to say? In a sense, we have the same problem, right? Like we're going to provide them some security in buying this kind of amazing experience. How do we give them that certainty, and what is kind of holding them back right now, Karen?
Yeah, I think I really like sort of what you were talking about, where you were saying about kind of having like a product quiz and being able to kind of step the customer through the decision making for them. Essentially, like you're basically narrowing down that entire huge range of things that they could choose from into sort of like 2 or 3 different choices. That's definitely something that we've found that a lot of clients are coming to these days, is saying like, how do we make that product easier for that customer to kind of decide on and purchase? So creating and looking into something like product quizzes and things is definitely a big sort of help in that sort of experience. So yeah, I think that would definitely sort of go a long way. What was the sort of second part, Simon, that you were sort of saying?
No, yeah, sorry, I guess I had a long preamble. That was a question in itself, but I was sorry about that. My thinking was like, why? Like it's so obvious that people want this, like brands and vendors want this for their stores, but something is holding them back. There's kind of different challenges that they see that makes them not invest in this very often, or not invest as much as I would expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's like sort of building these things out does cost quite a bit of money, for instance, right? And also the resources that go in behind actually having to power this thing and create all the content and things like that. That's also kind of like a blocker and a barrier for some brands. But things like using Sanity and stuff to kind of help make that easier and make that whole sort of like content manageable, it goes really a long way to kind of helping kind of lower that sort of barrier and lower that risk to kind of allowing brands to kind of enter into that space and bring those sort of experiences to life on the front end.
Yeah, that's also my impression. A lot of companies I talk to believe that like making an amazing experience is like they have to make every page manually. Like they have to type in all of that content and create all of those kind of content blocks. And it's like has to be thousands of pages for some stores, and then I feel like we can that's just overwhelming anyway. But I think there are solutions to that are not that, right? Eli, you have one of the great solutions for that you like to apply, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think justifying spend from a marketing, but also like let's call it e-commerce merchandising perspective, one of the main aspects or the key things that we can contribute as an agency would be some sort of analytics, whether that be market wide or industry specific. The matter of fact is we've built probably 100 different variations of the same component based on what the product is that they're trying to sell. So the chances are we can probably collate some sort of justifiable metric via analytics to say, hey, here's one version of this, here's what it looks like, here's how it performed, here's how it performs now that we've made the change to their site. So that's one piece. If you're not already tracking your analytics based on component usage and user experience criteria, then that's a great opportunity to start doing that, especially if you're an agency, especially if you build websites and experiences for your clients. The other thing too is experimentation, A/B testing. If you're not certain if a particular component or solution is going to solve a particular problem, then you have to find out. The way that you do that is by implementing, something like Optimizely in order to run A/B tests concurrently on your site, so that you know how your user bases react differently, or maybe you'd be surprised, react the same to the component that it is that you're trying to test against.
Karen,
I could probably add some to that as well, because what we sort of find is that a lot of brands will come to us and they want like the end goal now, rather than slowly trying to iteratively basically make their way there. And so they try and put like a lot of spend into trying to get like what is like the golden website straight away, without testing, like you say, like A/B testing these like sections and components and things like that. So it's super, super important to kind of be like, what is the MVP? What do we need right now? And we'll slowly build up those components as we sort of go. And sort of, you really have to think about your website not as pages or templates. You have to think about it as smaller pieces. So for instance, a homepage, right? On a homepage, you would have a hero section, you might have a product carousel, and you might have some sort of text section. Now, some people might think of that is the template, it's hard, fixed, and that's rigid, right? But you can actually decide, do you know what? I want that hero section, and I'm going to put it on my PDP instead. And maybe be able to reuse that component. So we like to try and get, and I'm sure you do as well, you like to get our clients to kind of think in a more sort of component-driven way, where it is a small piece of content that you can reuse across your site in many different places. Therefore, you don't have to go away and build 1,000 pages individually. You can build one piece and then duplicate it across.
That would be, for example, like your material details, like you have lots of apparel, has a great material story. That would be one story on 700 pages.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think simplifying your product offering into a design system, and drawing those conclusions and those assumptions that you're making from an experiential perspective, from those set of components that are derived from your design system. That's ultimately, what we aim to do with every one of our clients, is to give them essentially the Lego building blocks that they need in order to build any combination of component experiences on their sites. There was a question for me in the chat. What's one of the off-the-shelf, or can I give an example of a component and how I would track analytics between that? So I think, Karen, you kind of went into it a little bit. Let's talk about the hero component. The hero component takes on many forms, whether that's a main image on the background with a title and then some CTAs and some text. If you want to A/B test this with analytics against a different version, maybe you have text left aligned in one version, maybe you have text right aligned in one version. Maybe the A/B test is purely content based. So you just want to test the differences in some of the different wordings that you're using. Personally, the way that I would approach that is build a component that is flexible enough to take on those variations. So a singular hero component with some options. Sanity is really good for this. I can drop in fields ad hoc without messing up any of my related component code. That way, if I do want to do left align text or image left text right, for example, it's just a simple option switch to do that. And then in terms of analytics, if I'm dropping in custom IDs, then I can track a component based on the element IDs using something like Google Analytics. If you're already on Google Analytics, Shopify's got a good built-in tool for implementing Google Analytics.
I think that was a really interesting perspective, because I feel like, of course, measuring is like obvious. You should always do that. Make sure you have like a way to feedback on your performance. But I think you have a great observation that very often you don't, as part of your data, you don't actually know if you're trying to vary things. It's hard to, like, you can of course do A/B testing, but it should basically be part of like every day. It shouldn't even be considered always like an A/B test. I'm just trying something, making sure that goes into the context for the data I have. I think that also goes to one thing that keeps happening in stories I hear is you want to have a varied, rich experience, and you start out there. Maybe that's your big kind of golden website that you start out with. Then you start optimizing, and then you're kind of making everything the same. And then when I ask like who's doing the optimizing, the answer is invariably is the developers and the designers. And of course they can't experiment with the content. It's not part of their kind of at least not part of their mental framing. So I wonder, is there a way to have the kind of content creators, marketers, the people kind of running the day-to-day of the site own more of the performance and be able to then kind of customize specifically, kind of optimize the performance of a particular set of product pages, for example, and not think so holistically about like the whole kind of, you get my drift, like the generics of the site?
Yeah, for sure. One of the ways to do that is by implementing a tool like Sanity. So our clients love Sanity because we're able to give them Sanity Studio, which essentially is a UI where they can have full control over their content. The other thing that we consider when we approach structured content or content composure tools like Sanity is empowering them with the tools to also impact their own A/B tests. So one of the fields by default that we give within our Sanity components is the ability to input your own analytics ID. The way that we ingest that on the code side is we have a data attribute or a data parameter that is then captured by our analytics platform, in this case GA4 or Google Analytics 4. So wherever those IDs are present, they can then go back into reporting and say, hey, how did my Hero Component version 2 ID perform versus Hero Component version 3, for example. So by giving them the power and by having the foresight to build your solution around solving those problems, you end up with a really powerful tool.
Exactly. So you're talking about like design systems, thinking about the site as Lego bricks in kind of both the design pieces, but also in the content pieces. Like, can you talk to that a bit, Karen? Like, how do you do that? Like, specifically, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so when we're sort of like talking about design systems and things like that, it really is like the common language between the front end, the user experience design, and the development of the actual site and the technology as well. So what we like to try and do is essentially really align those two. And so we're speaking the sort of same language. So when we're talking about let's talk about a hero slider again, we have this component that we've designed over here, and development have got this build of this component over here, and those kind of things match one for one. And so we know as designers that when we're going to keep reusing this section, we know that development also knows that they can keep reusing it as well, and basically reuse that same component across the whole site. But sort of going back to your point about like the sort of wider team and who can kind of like utilize access the tool. It could be everybody within your sort of team. It shouldn't be kind of just held to like 1 or 2 people within your team of sort of who can only test things. It should be everybody has a say within that kind of environment to kind of be like, hey, what about we test this? Or, hey, I think we need this piece of component here. How quickly can we do it? So definitely opening up that sort of wider barrier and creating those communication channels for all teams to collaborate is definitely where we see the best sort of outcome for experiences and for content.
That's what we see where a lot of people come to us after building out things without having a proper structured content CMS. It's a lot to do with getting that kind of speed, like being able to change things quickly, being able to have every decision pushed down to the kind of day-to-day team, not having to wait for developers or designers, and having designers and developers working in a more strategic kind of approach, and everything else being kind of driven by the content. Eli, do you have anything more you want to add? Like, I know you're a big kind of proponent of design systems. Do you have anything in this that you wanted to touch upon, or do you want me to move on?
Just wanted to add that the multi-environment setup within Sanity helps tremendously with regard to cross-team collaboration, because what it means for us is we're able to have one team focused on content delivery, have another team focused on reviewing that content delivery, and then being able to then go back and schedule all of those changes based on what those approvals might be, or based on what campaigns might be rolling out. So yeah, I know I keep shouting out Sanity's core functionality and features, but we're a huge fan.
You actually set up different workflows for different roles.
Yes.
Perfect.
Exactly.
I remember we spent so much time implementing that, but actually I've not seen it in the wild so much. That's good to hear. Yeah. So there's a question about common mistakes, and I want to kind of focus that a bit on. I mean, the most common mistake in my view is obvious. It's like not investing in the experience. But let's say you are investing in the experience, and you mentioned one common mistake, Karen, is not experimenting. It is kind of refining too early. But let's talk about some common kind of mistakes when we invest. Yeah. When we invest, like Eli, kick it off.
Yeah, I think one of the common mistakes that we see is actually, I'm going to turn this on its head, an over-investment or an over-obsession in smaller UX details. So I can't think of an example specifically, but what I'll say is this: go back to your analytics and measure whether or not it's worth the investment. What I mean to say by saying that is, if it's only 4% of your user subset, is it worth requesting this feature that will cost you tens of thousands of dollars from your agency? Right? So like making that justification is often like the hardest part of my job day to day is convincing my clients out of making these decisions, because I want you to get the best investment out of what it is that you're paying us to do. But additionally, I want you to start focusing on the changes that you could make that might have more meaningful impact. How does this happen and why does this happen? There's a lot of factors. Sometimes it's like, hey, the CTO really loves the color purple, right? When in fact, that color might be impacting your accessibility because it's not a color that is, different enough from the background ratio or whatever it is, technical reasoning insert here. But yeah, so just making these decisions in a more meaningful manner and justifying the investment. That's probably the biggest mistake that we've seen.
Yeah, so like putting the big rocks in first, then refining
exactly.
later.
Exactly.
Yeah. I see that a lot as well. Like, Karen,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, be more strategic. Like, that's literally like just please be more strategic. There's so many like feelings and emotions and stuff that sometimes come into play, like you say, Eli, where someone likes the purple button, it's like that is not going to like help with much, so I definitely employ people to be testing something. If you're not testing something daily, like you're doing something wrong. So I would highly be testing something all the time, even just small little content changes, like the CTA change of like the content of the way that you're kind of like showing the CTA, the position of it, that stuff makes like a lot of difference, and those small little tweaks in a lot of places adds up to a massive amount, where instead a lot of people come to us and they'll say, I really like what this website is doing, can we copy that, and like copy that section? And you really have to explain, well, that works for them, but like, what is your content, and what are you trying to say? How does that work for you? And how does that fit into the wider sort of branding and experience of your site? So that's super important. Is like, do that analytics, constantly test as well. And like you say, a lot of small things adds up to a large amount of things. Like, some people think they have to invest a huge amount of money to get big returns, where actually a lot of small little things actually gives you better returns. So that is definitely a big one.
But when you want to, let's say you have a great idea, like you have a novel idea. It's like you can't, in a sense, get there by incremental changes in an existing PDP. Let's say you talked about quizzes, like maybe that doesn't exist. Maybe you want to invent something. What's a kind of like a rational and iterative way to do that? Because I guess like the customer will usually come like, we have this grand vision now, like do all this work and then let's figure it out. But I'm guessing, how do we stop them, and what do you recommend them do?
Yeah, I mean, a good thing is always be speaking to your users, always be speaking to your customers. They will give you some great ideas. And I do find that a lot of people don't do that enough. They don't speak to their users, and we come in and we kind of, as designers, actually start talking to their users on their behalf and start finding out these things where, a bunch of users could essentially be saying, hey, like, we're really finding it hard to understand your product offering around these products. And so then you start to unpick that a little bit more. You might want to do some prototyping. You might want to test those prototypes with some users and get some valuable feedback that way. So you're not spending that massive investment, especially into the sort of the development and the technology side of things first. And then once you feel like, yes, the users are getting it, they're understanding it a little bit better, and the business feels like at ease that it's solving this problem, then that's when you start to invest in those things, and then test it once you've invested it as well.
Eli?
Along the same vein, I think that one of the things that we do internally, and I apologize if I'm a little bit repetitive here, but one of the things that I'm just going to keep turning it back to our internal experience. One of the things that we do internally, on top of testing for analytics, etc., is just trying to get a better understanding of what the client's goals are, what the endpoint is, whether that's conversion rates or whether that's click-through rates, or maybe even sometimes it's just impressions, right? They just want to get the product page or the PDP out there. So in terms of like, how experimental can we get? How can we slowly get to where we're getting? In development, we have this thing called progressive enhancement. I like to think of UX in the same way. I also like to think of product solutions in the same way. Is there a Shopify app that already does the quiz builder thing? Can you use that? Can you test it? Can you justify the investment in order to build something custom after using that? What does a phased approach look like using this product? Talk to those product offering teams, talk to their, engineering platform solution engineers, see what your options are.
Yeah, Karen, you just had the phrase "be more strategic." I think a lot of people think being strategic means like thinking a lot up ahead. So I usually try and talk people into let's think about compounding tactics. Like you do small things. It's what we've been saying basically, or in different ways, all this conversation. Like do small things, but have them compound. Like make sure they compound by testing, by having a clear concept where you want to go, what you want to achieve, and then iterate your way to the actual solution. There's one thing that you have mentioned, Eli, in the past that we haven't touched upon, and it's a mistake I see a lot where you have great ideas and you invest in the end user experience, but it's not connected to a corresponding editorial experience. Like to the people inside the company are working super hard to pull things together, whereas the end user experience might be great. Eli?
Yeah,
One
I
of your
mean,
pet peeves.
100%. So, yeah, if you're not testing your content in the same way that you're testing the actual UX and UI, you don't know the impact of the changes that you are making. Similar to the content perspective, if your core marketing team is focused on delivering top tier marketing content, you're spending on ads, you're spending on copywriters, you're spending on designers. Why wouldn't you make that same investment on the delivery side with regards to content, right? So what I mean to say by that is, if I don't have, so pretend I'm a client, if I don't have the ability to test as fast as I need to test based on the rapid evolution of my content, or even let's just talk competitiveness. If I want to stay competitive in my market, the way that I do that through content is by ensuring that my team is able to pivot and make those changes in real time. Is my user base, meme driven? Great. Then I need to make sure that I can pivot and release content based on whatever trends are happening in the real world and in real time. So again, I'm going to call it back to Sanity. Sanity's deployment process and content deployment process is great for this. There's zero friction. Like I mentioned, we usually have like a test content and then a production content environment set up so that we build a workflow for approvals. We do everything by reviews. As soon as that review has been approved, then we can easily deploy those changes. But yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting thing, Simon, that you're talking about, sort of editorial and that sort of experience side of things. There is definitely more of a trend where editorial and e-commerce is becoming super blended. So people are finding your products and your brand through editorial pieces, through organic traffic into your blogs and into your editorial pieces. So there's a super big link between how do you get people through from these blog articles into your sort of, into your shopping area of your website, right? So there's a lot of kind of pieces of how do you bring in those kind of components like product carousels and product comparison tables and things into the actual articles themselves. And so having that blended sort of content in the sort of editorial sides is super, super powerful. So the best brands do that. They really do. So you move in between the shopping experience and the learning and the editorial side almost seamlessly these days in some of the best websites.
Yeah, I agree. I think editing a product page and editing a post or an article should be seen as the kind of same thing, right?
Exactly.
It's all content that we expose to our users.
Yeah, gone are the days where UGC just means reviews. Right? If we're partnering with influencers or if we're partnering with product reviewers, we need to empower them with the same tools and the same platform and the same design components that we're using internally in order to maintain that type of design consistency. So one of the features that Sanity has that no other CMS is able to solve right now from a CMS perspective is the fact that you're able to relate back to the product data and, essentially expose all the product data directly within the content. It doesn't matter if this platform that I'm building is on another application or is on, an external website. Because Sanity is headless, I can add these blocks, these product headless blocks, or these product detail blocks to any of my platforms and to any of my applications. So yeah, that's like nobody else does it in the same way. Amazing. Oftentimes what you'll see and the way that we've solved it outside of Sanity is by building our own custom component that pulls in the product ID, and there's a lot of this developer overhead. You've already solved for that simply. So yeah.
That's amazing. So before we land this and before we wrap up, there is one interesting question I want to rephrase it a little bit, because like doing experiments is great, but it's hard to get. Let's say if you do too many experiments at once, you don't learn anything. Like how do you balance that? Like how do you do an appropriate amount of experiments and make sure your information is actually actionable? Karen, you can start that off.
Yeah, you don't want to do too many tests, otherwise, like you say, you don't know what's actually impacting the end sort of metric. So you want to go after sort of one metric that you want to see like go up or go down, and you want to do one small test and see how that goes and track it. And then once you've learnt how that went, then you put that into play, and then you do your next sort of follow-on test from there. But I mean, Eli probably has some more sort of technical answers to that. But sort of, yeah, do small tests at a time. Don't decide I'm going to put 5 tests on my product page, because then you'll never know which one is actually working or not. So you want to do kind of like 1 test per page and then sort of see how that goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, I would actually even say refrain from any sort of focus tests at the beginning. Just collect analytics. See who your users are, see what their demographics are, get to understand your analytics. Once you understand your analytics and your users, I feel like then you're able to kind of piece together some user journeys or some user profiles, as we call them, or user personas. If what you'll often find is through collecting analytics, you'll see like, actually my demographics for this particular product says that it's moms between the ages of 30 and 50. Great. What more can you learn from that demographic? How else can you get in touch with them? Where else can you find more of those types of people? Once you understand your users, only then are you able to really sink your teeth into the strategy of what it is that you need to do from a content perspective, from a product perspective. And I say product perspective because you might even find that like, oh, I need to be offering this option because of my demographics. Or obviously through analytics, I'm finding that a lot of the feedback that I'm receiving is because I'm missing fuchsia as a color for my bike spokes or something like that, right? So plain and simple, step 1, collect analytics. Exactly. Develop your strategy and your story and everything else afterwards.
There's been so many times there's been so many times where brands will come to us and say, this is our target audience, and then you would go onto their analytics and have a look, and they wouldn't match at all. And you'd say, like, you'd bring it to them and they were like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. Analytics is super, super powerful. So definitely go take a look at them if you're not.
Use evidence. And also have lots and lots of traffic so you get information fast. Like just have
exactly. That was actually one of the questions that was asked is how long should these tests run?
Yeah, I was trying to speed run that question because we should be wrapping up. So I was like, just have lots of traffic so you don't have to run them fast as long, and then make sure you run them until you have significance, right? Like you have enough results to make a call. If you have little traffic, it will be forever, and you might not be able to do experiments until you have more. So then that's just how it is, right? So let's, as a kind of wrap up, let's kind of each do like a takeaway or two, like our core advice from this session. Let's start with you, Karen.
Yeah, so when sort of creating sort of online shopping experiences that give you the edge, content is king. Content is the key to it all. Make sure that you're investing in really good content. I'm talking photography, the sort of editorial pieces, everything like that. That is what customers are there to kind of engage with. That's what you're sort of building for them, and ensuring that you're delivering that sort of content as and when they need it. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the main pieces of the sort of main takeaway here is the content is king, and ensure that you sort of, give it to your users as and when and how they want it.
Perfect. Eli?
I would say that my key piece of takeaway and my key advice is to listen to your app partners or your agency partners. What I mean by that is Sanity was built by people who identified a need. What that means is they've seen your problems over and over and over again. They've seen stores that sell similar types of products. Get in touch with your solution engineers from Sanity or from Shopify, and create a good partner relationship with them, get in touch with their network, see how you can engage with their communities, because oftentimes what you'll find is someone else is also experiencing the same problem, and someone's also already developed a solution to this problem. Just want to shout out the Sanity Slack channel. If you're not already on it, that's a great starting point for any type of problem that's related to Sanity, whether it's implementation or how do I track or how do I start X, Y, and Z. Hit the channel up with a question, and there's plenty of people with experiences that might be able to guide you.
Yeah, it's a great community. That's so fantastic. Thank you, everyone who's on there. Perfect. Thank you. We'll wrap up now. That was really amazing. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Karen. It was a perfect session.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Simon and Sanity team.
It's been great. Thank you very much.